The dragons sleep. The stars twinkled coldly over the charred ruins of what was once the thriving human colony of Haven 7. What had been a bustling city filled with laughter, dreams, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow now lay silent, consumed by the blackened scars of war. The invaders, the Krox Empire, had descended without warning, their sleek warships blotting out the sun. The attack was swift, brutal, and merciless, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. Leo Renner, a young engineer, crouched in the rubble of a collapsed research facility, his breathing shallow as he scanned the skies for any sign of returning Krox patrols. His dirty hands clutched an old data pad he'd salvaged from the wreckage, its cracked screen barely functioning, but still displaying fragments of ancient schematics. He didn't know what drove him to keep looking through the ruins when most survivors had fled into hiding. Perhaps it was desperation, or maybe it was the faint whisper of a legend his grandfather used to tell. Earth's dragons, his grandfather would say with a glimmer of hope in his eyes, are not just stories. They're real boy waiting for the right time to awaken. Back then, Leo had laughed it off as another one of his grandfather's wild tales. But now, as he stood amidst the desolation, those words echoed in his mind. The Krox had made it clear that humanity was nothing more than an obstacle in their quest for galactic domination. They'd raised Haven 7 to make an example, and humanity's remaining forces were too scattered and weak to fight back. The ground beneath Leo's feet shifted slightly, and he froze, his heart pounding. Was it an aftershock from the orbital bombardment? He glanced around, but the debris remained still. Shaking his head, he took another step, and the ground shifted again, this time with more force. Before he could react, the earth gave way entirely, and he tumbled into a hidden cavern below. Groaning, Leo blinked away the dust and debris. His body ached from the fall, but as he looked around, his pain was forgotten. The cavern was massive, its walls lined with strange, glowing inscriptions that pulsed faintly with a golden hue. In the center of the chamber lay something that made his breath catch, a colossal metallic figure, coiled like a serpent but with wings folded against its sides. The figure resembled a dragon from Earth's ancient myths, but it was unlike anything Leo had ever seen. Its body was sleek and mechanical, with intricate engravings running along its surface. The dragon's eyes were closed, and it appeared dormant, as if it had been waiting for centuries. "What is this?" Leo whispered, his voice trembling. He approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. The dragon didn't move, but the air around it seemed charged with energy, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He reached out hesitantly, his hand brushing against its cold surface. A sudden hum filled the chamber, and the glowing inscriptions on the walls flared to life. Leo stumbled back as the dragon's eyes, two blazing orbs of gold, snapped open. The hum grew louder, reverberating through the cavern. The dragon's head turned slowly, its gaze locking onto Leo. Despite its mechanical appearance, its movements were fluid, almost alive. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, though the dragon's mouth didn't move. "Human, why have you awakened me?" Leo's throat went dry, and he stammered. I didn't mean to. I fell." The dragon tilted its head, as if studying him. "The Krox have come, haven't they?" it said, its voice filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "They have violated the sanctity of Earth's guardianship." Leo frowned. "Guardianship? What are you talking about? What are you?" The dragon's eyes narrowed. "I am Aegis, the first of Earth's protectors. We were created in humanity's darkest hour to defend against threats beyond the stars. But the world forgot us, and we were left to sleep. Until now." Leo's mind raced. Could this be real? Could his grandfather's stories have been more than just myths? He opened his mouth to ask another question, but a distant rumble interrupted him. The Krox patrols were returning, their ships hovering low over the colony's ruins. "They'll find this place," Leo said, panic rising in his voice. We have to leave. Aegis shook its massive head. No, this is where the fight begins. Humanity may have forgotten us, but we have not forgotten our purpose. The Krox will regret waking the dragons. With a deafening roar, Aegis unfurled its wings, sending a gust of wind through the cavern. The ground trembled as the dragon's massive form rose, its golden eyes blazing with fury. Leo shielded his face from the swirling debris, a mix of fear and awe coursing through him. This wasn't just a machine. It was a force of nature. As Aegis ascended through the cavern's ceiling, carving a path to the surface, Leo scrambled to follow. Above them, the Krox patrol ships had already begun to converge on the site, their weapons trained on the emerging dragon. For the first time since the invasion began, a flicker of hope ignited in Leo's heart. The dragons were awake, and humanity's fight was far from over. As the first Krox ship fires, Aegis counters with a devastating energy blast, lighting up the battlefield and leaving Leo to wonder if this ancient protector could truly turn the tide of war. The dragons rise. The scorched skies above Haven 7 were alive with chaos as the Krox patrol ships swarmed the area, their engines howling like predators on the hunt. On the ground, the ruins trembled as Aegis, the ancient metallic dragon, rose to its full height. Golden energy rippled across its sleek surface, the markings on its body glowing brighter with each passing moment. Leo stood frozen in the cavern's opening, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. Aegis, a being from humanity's forgotten past, had emerged from centuries of slumber, and now it was preparing to fight. For the first time since the Krox invasion began, something more powerful than fear pulsed in Leo's chest: hope. As the Krox patrol leader barked orders from their flagship, one of the smaller ships opened fire. A searing plasma bolt streaked through the air, aiming directly for Aegis. Without hesitation, the dragon moved with impossible speed, its wings spreading wide. With a single beat of its wings, it launched into the air, the force of its takeoff shattering nearby debris. The plasma bolt struck the ground where Aegis had been, leaving a smoking crater. Above, the dragon unleashed a deafening roar that echoed across the colony ruins. It wasn't just a sound, it was a declaration. The Krox ships hesitated, as if the pilots were momentarily stunned by the sheer presence of the ancient creature. Leo scrambled out of the cavern, his heart pounding as he watched Aegis streak toward the nearest patrol ship. The dragon's golden eyes locked onto its target, and its mouth opened wide. A surge of energy crackled through the air before a blazing beam of light shot from Aegis's jaws, slicing through the Krox ship like a knife through paper. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, fragments raining down like falling stars. The remaining patrols quickly regrouped, their weapons lighting up the darkened skies. Leo ducked behind a collapsed wall as beams of energy rained down, scorching the ground around him. His mind raced. Aegis was powerful, but there were too many ships. The dragon couldn't possibly take them all on alone. Think, Leo, think, he muttered to himself, clutching the data pad he'd salvaged earlier. The schematics on the screen showed more than just Aegis. It displayed the locations of other similar dragons hidden across different colonies. Aegis descended briefly, its massive body landing with a thunderous crash beside Leo. "We cannot hold them off for long," the dragon rumbled, its voice resonating in Leo's chest. "The others must awaken." Leo looked up, realization dawning. "You mean the other dragons? They're real? They're still out there?" Aegis nodded, its golden eyes burning with urgency, scattered across the remnants of humanity's reach. "But they lie dormant. Only the activation beacon can wake them." "Beacon?" Leo asked, scanning the datapad again. His eyes widened as he spotted a section marked Primary Activation Node. It was located in a nearby facility, one that had been heavily bombed during the Krox attack. "You're saying I have to go there?" Through all of this, the dragon's gaze softened, a surprising gentleness in its otherwise fearsome demeanor. "You are not alone. I will ensure you reach the node. Before Leo could respond, a Krox warship broke through the clouds, its weapons charging. Aegis turned sharply, releasing another energy blast that struck the ship's shield, shattering it in a brilliant display of sparks. The ship veered off course, crashing into the distant mountains. "We move now," Aegis commanded. It lowered its body, motioning for Leo to climb onto its back. Hesitant but with little choice, Leo scrambled onto the dragon, gripping the cold metal tightly. The surface hummed beneath his hands, as if alive. With a powerful leap, Aegis launched into the air, soaring above the ruins. The wind whipped past Leo's face as he held on for dear life. Below, the Krox forces regrouped, their fleet shifting focus to target the dragon. The sky lit up with streaks of plasma, but Aegis dodged with an agility that defied its massive size. "Hold on," Aegis warned as it banked sharply, narrowly avoiding a missile that detonated behind them. The explosion rocked the air, sending shockwaves that made Leo's stomach lurch. He clung tighter, his eyes watering from the intensity. The remains of the activation node facility came into view, a sprawling complex of shattered buildings and scorched earth. It was surrounded by Krox soldiers, their armored figures patrolling the area. Leo's heart sank. How are we supposed to get through all of that? Aegis's wings flared, and its voice grew cold. "Leave that to me." The dragon descended rapidly, landing with enough force to shake the ground. The Krox soldiers turned, their weapons raised, but Aegis unleashed a devastating blast of energy that obliterated their ranks. Smoke and fire filled the air as the dragon advanced, clearing a path for Leo. "Go," Aegis roared, swiping its tail to knock a Krox vehicle aside. "I will hold them here." Leo hesitated, his legs trembling as he stared at the chaos. But he knew there was no time to waste. Clutching the data pad, he sprinted toward the facility, dodging debris and the occasional stray shot. Behind him, Aegis fought with relentless ferocity, its roars echoing like thunder. Inside the facility, Leo found the activation node, a towering console surrounded by broken machinery. His fingers flew across the controls, inputting the sequence he'd memorized from the datapad. The console flickered to life, and a low hum filled the air. Outside, Aegis fought valiantly, but the Krox reinforcements were relentless. Just as the dragon was pushed to its limits, the ground beneath them rumbled. From the distance, golden lights began to flare, one by one, across the horizon. The dragons were waking. Leo watched in awe as the beacon's signal spread across the skies, and faint roars echoed in the distance. The Krox soldiers hesitated, their confidence faltering. Aegis turned to Leo, its eyes gleaming. "The tide is turning, human. You have done well. But the real battle has only just begun. The war begins." The air vibrated with the sound of distant roars as the signal from the activation beacon rippled across the galaxy. Across devastated colonies, buried beneath mountains, oceans, and cities, the ancient dragons began to stir. Metallic wings unfolded from centuries of slumber, eyes of gold, silver, and emerald flickering to life as the defenders of Earth awakened once more. Leo stood amidst the ruins of the activation node facility, sweat dripping down his face as he stared at the horizon. Glowing lights in the distance marked the awakening of other dragons. Each pulse filled the sky with golden trails of energy, like shooting stars. For the first time in weeks, hope burned brightly in his chest. Behind him, Aegis remained locked in a fierce battle with the Krox forces. The dragon's golden energy beams cut through enemy ships with precision, but the Krox had called in reinforcements. Larger warships descended, their plasma cannons lighting up the battlefield. "Leo, move," Aegis bellowed, its voice cutting through the chaos. Leo snapped out of his trance and ducked as an explosion erupted nearby, sending debris flying. "Where am I supposed to go?" he yelled, clutching the datapad to his chest. To the others, Aegis growled, its metallic tail whipping around to knock a Krox ground vehicle aside. "They will need guidance. The dragons are powerful, but they lack coordination without a leader. You're saying me? Leo asked, incredulous. I'm just an engineer. I don't know how to lead anyone, let alone an army of dragons. Aegis swiped at an incoming Krox soldier, sending them flying. You woke us. You understand the beacon's purpose. That makes you the bridge between us and your people. Now go. Leo hesitated, his hands trembling. He had spent his entire life repairing broken machines, not commanding mythical war machines in a galactic battle. But as he looked around at the destruction, the burning wreckage of his home, the desperate cries of survivors, he realized he didn't have a choice. With a deep breath, he nodded. All right, but you better not let them kill you while I'm gone. Aegis's eyes gleamed with amusement. I have no intention of falling today. Before Leo could respond, the ground shook violently as a massive Krox warship descended overhead. The ship dwarfed anything Leo had seen before, its hull bristling with weaponry. Aegis snarled, and the air around it crackled with energy. Go now, Aegis commanded. I'll hold them here. Reluctantly, Leo turned and sprinted toward the edge of the battlefield. As he ran, a smaller dragon, sleek and silver with piercing blue eyes, swooped down and landed beside him. The dragon lowered its body, motioning for him to climb aboard. I'm Ember, the dragon said, its voice softer and lighter than Aegis's but no less commanding. Aegis sent me to assist you. Leo hesitated for only a moment before scrambling onto Ember's back. The dragon's surface was cool and smooth, almost like polished stone. With a powerful leap, Ember launched into the sky, the wind whipping past Leo's face as they soared above the chaos below. From the air, Leo could see the devastation the Krox had wrought on Haven 7. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to ash, and the once pristine rivers ran black with soot. But beyond the destruction, he could see movement. Other dragons, their metallic bodies shimmering in the sunlight, rising from their hiding places. Some were massive, with wingspans that could blot out the sun, while others were smaller and more agile, darting through the air like bolts of lightning. As they flew, Ember spoke. The Krox will not back down easily. They have studied your kind and see you as weak. Well, they're not wrong, Leo muttered. We were weak. But maybe that's changing. Ember hummed thoughtfully. Perhaps, but the dragons alone will not be enough. Humanity must stand with us. Together, we can drive the Krox from this galaxy. They reached a clearing where a group of newly awakened dragons had gathered. Each one looked different. Some were golden, others silver or bronze, and one was black as obsidian, its eyes glowing with fiery orange light. The dragons watched Leo closely as Ember landed, and he dismounted. Their gazes felt heavy, filled with ancient wisdom and judgment. This is the one who woke the beacon, one of the dragons rumbled, its voice deep and resonant. Ember nodded. Yes, this is Leo. Leo raised a hand in an awkward wave. Hi. The dragons exchanged glances, their metallic scales catching the light. Finally, the black dragon stepped forward. You are human, it said, its tone skeptical. Why should we follow you? Leo swallowed hard, feeling the weight of their stares. Because I didn't wake you to sit back and watch us lose, he said, his voice steady despite the fear twisting in his gut. The Krox think we're weak, but they're wrong. Together, we can show them what happens when you mess with humanity. The dragons remained silent for a moment. Then the black dragon let out a low chuckle. Bold words for a fragile creature. Very well. Show us what you can do. Before Leo could respond, the clearing erupted with light as a Krox fleet approached, their ships descending rapidly. The dragons roared in unison, their wings spreading as they prepared to face the enemy. Leo looked at Ember. What do we do now? Ember's eyes glinted with determination. We fight. The first wave of Krox ships fired, and the dragons surged forward, unleashing their fury. Leo climbed back onto Ember, his heart racing as he realized this was just the beginning. The war had truly begun. The dragons unite. The battlefield stretched out like a vast, smoldering canvas of destruction. Smoke curled into the sky, and the once proud Haven 7 was little more than a graveyard of broken hopes. But above it all, a new force had risen. The dragons, ancient protectors long thought to be myths, now filled the skies with their metallic wings and glowing eyes. They moved with grace and power, their roars shaking the heavens as they clashed with the Krox invaders. Leo gripped tightly onto Ember as the silver dragon banked sharply, dodging a plasma beam from a Krox warship. The air around them was thick with the hum of engines, the crackle of energy weapons, and the thunderous roars of dragons charging into battle. Leo's knuckles turned white as he clung to Ember's smooth metallic surface, his heart racing. "Leo, the others are scattered," Ember called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "They lack unity. Without coordination, we cannot win." Leo glanced around, his eyes darting from one dragon to the next. It was true. While the dragons were powerful, they fought independently, each attacking in their own way. The Krox, by contrast, were highly organized, their ships working together in tight formations to overwhelm their enemies. "We need to bring them together," Leo shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the roar of a nearby explosion. Ember's wings flared as she dodged another attack. "And how do you propose we do that, human?" Leo's mind raced. He wasn't a soldier, let alone a leader, but he was an engineer. And engineers solved problems. He glanced down at the data pad strapped to his wrist. The schematics of the dragons still glowed faintly, the details of their design whispering solutions to him. "The beacon," he exclaimed. "It's not just for waking them up. It can be used to send signals, right? To coordinate them." Ember's eyes flickered with understanding. "If the beacon's command protocols can reach all of us, it could work. But the Krox have tightened their grip on the field. We'll need to reach the central command post to amplify the signal." Leo nodded, his determination solidifying. "Then let's do it." As they soared through the chaos, Ember relayed the plan to Aegis and the other dragons. The ancient guardian responded with a booming roar that carried across the battlefield, rallying the scattered dragons toward the command post. It was a sight to behold. Beams of golden light streaked through the sky as the dragons formed up, their movements becoming more purposeful. The Krox, sensing the shift, unleashed their most devastating weapon yet. From the largest of their warships, a glowing sphere of pulsating energy launched into the air. It hung ominously for a moment before detonating, sending shockwaves rippling across the field. The blast disrupted the dragons' flight paths, sending many of them spiraling out of formation. Ember wobbled in the air, the shockwave nearly knocking Leo off her back. "They're using an EMP disruption field," she growled. "It's targeting our energy cores." Leo's stomach twisted. The dragon's strength came from their advanced energy systems. If those were disrupted, they would be vulnerable. He glanced at the command post ahead, now swarming with Krox soldiers and vehicles. They had fortified their position, expecting the dragons to come. "We need to take that field down," Leo said, "or we're finished." Aegis's voice crackled over the comms, its tone unyielding. "I will lead the charge. The Krox have overplayed their hand." From the horizon, Aegis descended like a meteor, its golden wings blazing with energy. The Krox soldiers scrambled to respond, their weapons firing in every direction, but Aegis was unstoppable. With a thunderous roar, it slammed into the center of the Krox formation, scattering their forces like leaves in a storm. Ember landed nearby, allowing Leo to jump off. He sprinted toward the control panel of the disruption field, dodging plasma bolts as he went. His fingers flew over the controls, bypassing Krox security systems with skills honed from years of engineering. The field generator's hum grew louder, vibrating through his bones. Come on, Leo muttered, sweat dripping down his face. Behind him, Ember and Aegis held the line, their energy blasts lighting up the battlefield as more dragons joined the fight. The disruption field pulsed again, sending another wave of interference through the air. Aegis staggered slightly, its golden eyes flickering. "Leo, hurry!" it roared. "I'm working on it," Leo shouted, his hands trembling as he entered the final override sequence. The console beeped, and the field generator sputtered. With a deafening crack, the device overloaded, sending a cascade of sparks into the air. The disruption field collapsed. The dragons roared in unison as their energy systems surged back to full power. Aegis straightened, its golden eyes burning brighter than ever. "The tide has turned," it declared, unleashing a devastating blast that obliterated the remaining Krox ground forces. Leo stumbled back, his chest heaving as he watched the dragons regroup. The battlefield was no longer a chaotic mess. The dragons moved as one, their attacks coordinated and precise. Even the Krox warships began to falter, their pilots panicking as the tide of battle shifted. For the first time, Leo allowed himself a small smile. They had done it. The dragons were united, and humanity finally had a fighting chance. As the last Krox ship retreated, Leo's datapad beeped with a new alert. Aegis's voice rumbled in his ear, its tone grim. "They're sending reinforcements, a full fleet." This was only the beginning. Leo looked to the sky, where the faint outlines of massive Krox dreadnoughts began to appear. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The dragon's secret. The battlefield settled into a tense quiet as the remaining Krox forces retreated beyond Haven 7's ruins. For a fleeting moment, the air was filled with the victorious roars of the dragons, their metallic bodies shimmering in the fading light. But the reprieve was short-lived. Above the horizon, faint shadows began to emerge. Massive Krox dreadnoughts, each bristling with weapons designed for planetary annihilation. Leo sat slumped against a broken wall, his breath heavy from the recent battle. His fingers absently brushed the now scorched data pad strapped to his wrist. It was barely functioning, the screen cracked and flickering. But it didn't take an engineer to understand what was happening. The Krox had called for reinforcements, ships far deadlier than anything they'd faced so far. Aegis approached, its golden eyes dim with exhaustion but still glowing with determination. Its massive body cast a protective shadow over Leo. "The Krox fleet is regrouping," Aegis rumbled, its voice steady but grim. "We bought ourselves time, but not much." Leo pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling. "We can't take on dreadnoughts, Aegis, not even with all the dragons." Aegis's gaze shifted to the distant sky, where the first dreadnought's silhouette loomed closer. "There is something you must know, Leo," it said, its tone heavy with meaning. "Something the Krox do not yet understand." Leo frowned, wiping dirt from his face. "What are you talking about?" Aegis lowered its head, bringing its golden eyes level with Leo. "The dragons are not mere machines. We were created as protectors, yes, but our power is drawn from something far greater than technology. We are bound to the energy of Earth itself, its core, its lifeblood." Leo's stomach tightened. "Wait, are you saying that if Earth is destroyed, we die?" Aegis interrupted, its voice unflinching. "Without Earth, our energy sources will dissipate. That is why the Krox target your colonies so ruthlessly. They believe that humanity's strength lies in its people. They do not realize that it lies in the planet itself." Leo felt the weight of the revelation settle over him like a crushing wave. The Krox weren't just trying to conquer. They were trying to sever the dragons from their source of power. "So what do we do?" he asked, his voice strained. "How do we protect Earth and stop them at the same time?" Before Aegis could respond, Ember swooped down, landing beside them with a graceful thud. "There's more," she said, her voice urgent. "The Krox flagship carries a weapon, a planetary disintegrator. If they deploy it, Earth's core will be destabilized. We won't just lose the dragons. We'll lose everything." Leo's hands balled into fists. "Then we stop it. We take out the flagship before they have the chance." Aegis rumbled approvingly. "Bold, but their fleet will protect the flagship with everything they have. Leo's mind raced. He had no military training, no tactical experience, but he did know how to think creatively. He looked at the dragons gathered nearby, their gleaming bodies battered but unbroken. What if we don't attack the flagship head-on? What if we draw them away? Ember tilted her head. A distraction. Leo nodded, his plan taking shape. Exactly. We split their fleet. The dragons hit their smaller ships first, forcing them to divide their forces. Meanwhile, a small team infiltrates the flagship and disables the weapon before they can use it. Aegis considered this for a moment. It's risky. The flagship will be heavily guarded. Leo met Aegis's gaze, his determination unwavering. We don't have a choice. If we don't take that weapon out, everything we fought for is gone. The dragons exchanged glances, their silent communication filled with understanding. Finally, Aegis nodded. Very well. We will trust you, Leo. The plan takes shape. Over the next few hours, Leo worked tirelessly to finalize the plan. Using the beacon's remaining functionality, he coordinated with the other dragons to organize their forces. Aegis would lead the primary assault, drawing the bulk of the Krox fleet away from the flagship. Ember and a smaller team, including Leo, would infiltrate the flagship and sabotage the disintegrator weapon. As the final preparations were made, Leo stood on Ember's back, looking out at the dragons gathered around them. Despite their fearsome appearances, he could see the wariness in their movements, but he could also see their resolve. This is it, Leo said, his voice echoing across the field. The Krox think they've already won. Let's show them what it means to fight for something worth protecting. The dragons roared in unison, their metallic bodies glowing with renewed energy. The ground trembled beneath them as they took flight, a wave of golden light surging toward the advancing Krox fleet. The first wave. The Krox ships engaged immediately, their plasma cannons lighting up the darkened skies. But the dragons were faster, more agile, and far more coordinated than before. They weaved through the enemy formations, their energy blasts tearing through ships with devastating precision. As the battle raged, Ember broke off from the main group, carrying Leo and two smaller dragons toward the flagship. The massive vessel loomed ahead, its hull bristling with weaponry. It was a fortress in the sky, and every gun was aimed at the approaching team. We're in for a rough ride, Ember warned, dodging a barrage of plasma bolts. Leo gritted his teeth, holding on tightly. Just get us close enough to land. I'll take care of the rest. Ember let out a low growl. You'd better. I don't plan on dying today. As they neared the flagship, the smaller dragons broke off, drawing the flagship's fire away from Ember. With a powerful beat of her wings, Ember soared toward an exposed docking port on the ship's underbelly. The Krox gunners tried to track her, but she was too fast. With a jarring impact, Ember latched onto the docking port, her claws digging into the metal. Go, she barked. I'll hold position here. Leo climbed off her back, his heart pounding as he prepared to enter the enemy ship. Behind him, the sounds of battle echoed across the skies, a constant reminder of what was at stake. As Leo pried open the docking hatch and slipped inside, a Krox commander's voice echoed through the corridors. Intruders detected. Seal the weapon chamber. Leo's jaw tightened. The clock was ticking, and failure was not an option. The final battle. The corridors of the Krox flagship pulsed with an eerie red light, alarms blaring in rhythmic bursts. Leo's heart pounded as he sprinted through the metallic hallways, the sound of his boots echoing like a countdown. His mind raced to memorize the schematics displayed on his flickering datapad. Every second mattered, and every wrong turn could be his last. Behind him, Ember's voice crackled through the comms. Leo, I'm holding position, but they've dispatched fighters to intercept me. You need to move fast. I'm almost there, Leo replied, trying to keep his voice steady. His grip on the makeshift energy blaster he'd scavenged tightened. He had no illusions about his chances against the Krox soldiers if they caught him. Ahead, the weapon chamber loomed, guarded by a pair of Krox soldiers clad in dark, jagged armor. Their plasma rifles glowed faintly, the hum of charged energy filling the air. Leo ducked into a side corridor, his mind scrambling for a plan. He couldn't fight them head-on, not with his limited firepower. Glancing at the datapad, Leo spotted a ventilation system running parallel to the chamber. A grin tugged at his lips. That'll do. Inside the weapon chamber. The chamber itself was massive, dominated by the planetary disintegrator, a massive, pulsating orb of energy suspended in the center of the room by glowing conduits. The Krox soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and robotic. Above, automated turrets scanned for intruders. Leo crawled through the vent, his movements careful to avoid making noise. The heat from the weapon's core radiated through the walls, beads of sweat forming on his brow. As he reached the vent's edge, he peered down into the chamber, his breath catching at the sight of the weapon. It was beautiful in a terrible way, its energy shifting in hypnotic patterns. "Focus, Leo," he whispered to himself. He spotted the main control terminal near the base of the orb, where a Krox technician was busy entering commands. If he could disable the core from there, the weapon would be useless. Carefully, Leo dropped down from the vent, landing silently behind a stack of crates. He crept closer to the terminal, his blaster at the ready. His pulse quickened as the technician stepped away, leaving the controls momentarily unguarded. "This is it," Leo muttered, darting forward. His fingers flew across the console, bypassing the Krox security protocols with every ounce of skill he possessed. The interface was alien but logical, and he quickly located the core's control system. Suddenly, a guttural voice growled behind him. "Step away, human." Leo froze, his hand still on the console. Slowly, he turned to face a towering Krox commander, its crimson eyes glaring down at him. The commander's massive frame was covered in battle-scarred armor, and its plasma axe hummed menacingly. "Do you think your primitive tricks can stop us?" The commander sneered. "You're nothing." Leo's mind raced. He glanced back at the console, where the core's energy levels flickered. "I don't have to stop you," he said, forcing a smirk. "I just need to buy time." Before the commander could react, Leo grabbed a loose conduit from the console and jammed it into the control panel. Sparks erupted, and the weapon's energy levels fluctuated wildly. The chamber filled with a deafening roar as the orb destabilized, its glow shifting erratically. The commander roared in rage, swinging its axe. Leo dove out of the way, the blade slicing through the air where he'd been a moment before. He scrambled to his feet, firing his blaster at the commander. The shots barely dented its armor, but it gave him enough time to dart behind a support pillar. "Ember, I could use some help here," Leo shouted into his comms. Dragons to the rescue. Outside the flagship, Ember and the smaller dragons engaged in a desperate battle against Krox fighters. The skies were a chaotic symphony of plasma blasts and roaring dragons. Despite their agility, the dragons were outnumbered, and Ember's sleek silver body was marred with scorch marks. Hearing Leo's plea, Ember roared, "I'm coming, Leo. Hold on." With a powerful beat of her wings, she broke through the enemy line and sped toward the flagship. A pair of fighters tailed her, their weapons firing relentlessly. Ember twisted through the air, narrowly avoiding the blasts as she closed in on the docking port. Back inside, Leo's situation grew dire. The Krox commander cornered him, its plasma axe raised high. Just as it brought the blade down, a deafening crash echoed through the chamber. Ember burst through the wall, her claws raking across the commander's back and sending it sprawling. "Nice timing," Leo yelled, scrambling to his feet. Ember snorted, "You're welcome. Now finish this." Leo rushed back to the console, his hand shaking as he entered the final override sequence. The orb pulsed violently, its energy reaching critical levels. "Got it," he shouted. "The weapon's offline, but this place is about to blow." Ember lowered herself, motioning for Leo to climb on. "Then let's get out of here." The final escape. As they raced through the corridors, the flagship trembled from the weapon's destabilization. Explosions ripped through the ship, and Krox soldiers scrambled to evacuate. Ember soared through the chaos, dodging debris and collapsing structures as Leo clung tightly to her back. The flagship's hangar came into view, and Aegis's massive form loomed just beyond it, leading the remaining dragons in a final assault on the Krox fleet. The dreadnoughts, deprived of their superweapon, began to falter under the dragons' relentless attacks. Ember shot out of the flagship just as a massive explosion consumed it, the disintegrator's energy core imploding in a blinding flash. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield, scattering Krox ships and sending their fleet into disarray. As the Krox forces retreated, Leo looked out at the battered but victorious dragons. Aegis landed beside them, its golden eyes glowing with pride. "You've done well, Leo," Aegis said. "But the Krox will return, and next time, they'll bring even greater forces." Leo nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then we'll be ready, because now they know what happens when you wake the dragons." A new dawn. The battlefield was eerily silent. The remnants of the Krox fleet had retreated into the depths of space, their once imposing dreadnoughts reduced to fleeing shadows. The skies above Haven 7, once filled with fire and chaos, were now clear and calm. But the scars of war were everywhere: scorched earth, crumbling ruins, and the exhausted faces of the survivors who emerged from hiding. Leo stood at the edge of a smoldering crater, his body aching and his clothes covered in soot. Ember and Aegis landed beside him, their metallic forms glowing faintly in the early light of dawn. Around them, the other dragons gathered, their shimmering scales reflecting the rising sun. It was a sight both majestic and haunting, a testament to the ancient power that had been unleashed. For the first time in weeks, the survivors dared to hope. People began to emerge from the ruins, their eyes wide with awe as they stared at the dragons. Children clung to their parents, pointing at the magnificent creatures in both fear and wonder. Aegis lowered its massive head to meet Leo's gaze. "You have done well, human. The Krox are defeated for now." "For now," Leo echoed, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But they'll be back. And next time, they'll come with something worse." Aegis nodded solemnly. "That is why we must prepare. The dragons are awake, but our strength alone will not be enough. Humanity must stand united if we are to face the challenges ahead." The aftermath. In the days that followed, the survivors of Haven 7 began to rebuild. The dragons worked alongside the humans, using their immense strength to clear rubble and repair structures. For the first time, humans and dragons stood as allies, their bond forged in the crucible of battle. Leo found himself at the center of it all. He wasn't a soldier or a leader, but the dragons looked to him for guidance, and the survivors saw him as a symbol of hope. It was a role he had never asked for, but one he couldn't walk away from. One evening, as the survivors gathered around a makeshift campfire, Leo stood to address them. "We've been through hell," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "We've lost so much: our homes, our families, our peace. But we've also gained something the Krox can't take from us: unity." He gestured toward the dragons, who watched silently from the edge of the camp. "These dragons aren't just protectors. They're a part of us. They'd been here all along, waiting for the moment we needed them most. And now it's up to us to make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." The crowd murmured in agreement, their faces filled with determination. A new alliance. Aegis approached Leo after the gathering, its golden eyes glowing softly in the twilight. "You speak well, human. Your people listen to you." "I don't know about that," Leo said, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm just trying to keep everyone from falling apart." "That is what makes a leader," Aegis replied. "Not power, but the ability to inspire hope in the face of despair." Leo smiled faintly, though the weight of his responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. What happens now? Aegis turned its gaze toward the stars. The Krox will regroup. They will not accept defeat lightly. And there are others out there, empires and forces far more dangerous than the Krox. We must be ready. Leo followed Aegis's gaze, the stars twinkling like distant beacons of both promise and peril. Then we start preparing. Together. The final warning. As the rebuilding efforts continued, strange signals began to echo through the galaxy. They were faint, distorted, but unmistakable. The Krox were calling for reinforcements, reaching out to allies in distant corners of space. It was a chilling reminder that the war was far from over. One day, as Leo worked with Ember to repair a damaged energy core, Aegis approached him with grim news. "We intercepted a transmission," the dragon said, its voice tinged with urgency. "The Krox have sent word to their warlords. They are gathering their forces for a second invasion." Leo's stomach turned. "How long do we have?" "Months, perhaps weeks," Aegis replied. "But this time, they will not come alone." Leo clenched his fists, determination hardening his resolve. "Then we use the time we have. We strengthen our defenses, train our people, and awaken more dragons if we can." Aegis inclined its massive head. "You are learning quickly, Leo. Humanity has chosen its champion wisely." A glimpse of the future. As night fell, Leo stood on a hill overlooking the camp. The dragons rested nearby, their bodies shimmering under the starlight. Ember joined him, her silver form glowing faintly in the darkness. "Do you think we can win?" Leo asked quietly. Ember's eyes softened. "We already have. In a way, humanity has proven it can endure. And as long as you stand, Leo, so will we." Leo smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the stars. He knew the road ahead would be long and perilous, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The dragons were awake, humanity was united, and together they would face whatever challenges the galaxy threw at them. Ending note. As the first rays of dawn broke over Haven 7, the camp stirred with new purpose. The dragons stretched their wings, ready for the next fight. And Leo, standing at the center of it all, knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's story. A story of survival, resilience, and hope. The dragons were no longer sleeping, and neither was humanity. The galaxy would never be the same.